On June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. This decision eliminated the federal rights to abortion, allowing states to set their own policies. So, we're talking about abortion and transportation. I know a lot of people probably like, "Oh my gosh, that doesn't go together." It actually does. It actually does. And this is Lark
Kimberly.
and this is Auto Asphyxiation, and we talk about urban feminism. We talk about, oh, well, we talk about urban feminism, or actually feminist urbanism. I just made that up. We talk about feminist urbanism, and we talk about transportation and policy. So today we're talking about abortion, and it was just kind of like, I think about abortion because I was born in January. And you're like, what does that mean? As a person from Los Angeles, when you're born in January, that means you turn 16 before everyone else. That means you get your car before everyone else. So I, uh, being you know, an Angelino, I was going to a school, all girls Catholic school. They called us the whores on the hill because back in those days, back in the 90s, they just called you a whore. Anyway,
Right out to your face.
right to your face, right to your face. Like, if you weren't a good girl, and guess what? No one was a good girl. Everyone was a whore to them, in society. Like back in the day, like it was just a thing. If you were
Existing as a woman, you were a whore.
exactly. If you were a woman and you talked, you were a whore. And I essentially, my job, not my job, but I didn't need to get this job, but one of the things that I would do is I would actually take my friends to get abortions because I had a car. And Los Angeles had an interesting bus service. And it was kind of like, it wasn't like frequent bus service. We didn't have a train back then. Now I'm dating myself. Yeah, when I was alive, there wasn't a train in Los Angeles. And I would take my friends, I would have to drive my friends to get abortions. And this is something interesting because I'm kind of like, if you don't have a car, if you don't have a friend with a car, if you're not in a place where they have um abortion access, like, how do you get an abortion? Eventually in 2022, because of that ruling, the increase for in Louisiana, where actually, like, I'm a fifth generation Angelino, but my family's originally from Louisiana. If you're in Louisiana, that 2022 ruling, essentially you got an average of 1,720% increase on one-way travel to the nearest abortion provider. If you were in Texas, the other place that my family moved on the way to Los Angeles, is a 3,000%
Wow.
increase in travel time in regards to accessing abortion. So, Kimberly, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, I'm just kind of like, we don't really think of this as a thing, but it's a thing.
Well, like you, I was the person. I didn't have a car, but I was willing to drive anybody's car anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I was often tagged to drive my friends to the abortion clinic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the first one I remember, because her family was really good Catholics, and they could not have a daughter that had a baby out of wedlock. So it was kind of a you need to go do this kind of a thing. And I remember taking her afterwards to her friend's house, and her friend also, oddly enough, connected to a crime family in New Jersey. So that was an interesting place to go afterwards, and help a friend recover from the procedure like that.
No. It's just people don't really think about that. It's like with women, this is kind of like a thing. And the thing is that I don't know if guys have to experience this. I don't know if it's something that happens, but it's kind of like in high school, even junior high, some places, like, how do you get to the abortion clinic? And we think about, and this is about health access. It's not even about just it's not solely about abortions. And I'm not even about like this kind of thing, kind of like, well, you know, there are horrible things that could happen to you, and this is why you need an abortion. But you know what? It could just be you just didn't want to have a baby at
Yeah.
16. It could
Yeah.
be you had a boyfriend and you guys loved each other and you had sex, and because of the whole like puritanical thing, we didn't have as much information as we should have on birth control, and you got pregnant and you wanted to have an abortion. We don't have to like justify why you have an abortion. We don't have to say, oh, it was something, something horrible that happened. You could just not want a baby, and that is literally totally um,
Justifiable enough.
that's justifiable enough, because it's kind of like, but in a lot of ways though, if we think about access to healthcare and transportation, urbanism is part of that, because being able to get to the doctor, being able to access healthcare, and you not having a car, this is going to impact your ability. I mean, women get yeast infections, women get, different ailments in regards to just, reproduction issues. And we can't, if you're not in an urban area, a lot of people don't have access to this. And it seems like it's something that we take for granted. If you're living like a bigger city, like I was in Los Angeles, if you're in like New York City, you have access. But if you live in a rural area or you live in the suburbs, how do you access this kind of service?
Especially if you don't have a car or you don't have access to a car.
This is a problem. Like I think I brought this up last time. I have a relative who lives in Meher, and she lives in a trailer in Meher. And essentially there were no abortion. Well, as you see, the 3,000% increase in regards to people in Texas being able to access abortion service. She was in a trailer in Meher, Texas. This is East Texas. And there was no healthcare providers. There was no, it was one store. The one store they had was Walmart. I remember that. They had a Walmart. Everything else had closed down. Essentially, their whole life was around Walmart. And it was really very like shocking. And also another thing we could talk about is the executive order by Trump in regards to transgender affirmative care for minors. He did an executive order banning gender affirming care for minors. So essentially, if you're not in an urban area, even if you're in an urban area, I heard in New York, at NYU, they're stopping this gender affirming care for minors in New York City, and you know, this is like horrific. People are going to die behind this.
People are already dying behind this.
Yeah.
And what a lot of these people don't understand is that these executive orders that are done with such a broad brush that ban gender affirming care, they think that it takes care of only trans people. Oh, no. Gender affirming care is when your teenager, your son, has a little bit too much estrogen and now he has breasts. Gender affirming care is going to the doctor and having that corrected. Gender affirming care is precocious puberty and the medications that somebody takes when they start going into puberty too early, and that can cause severe side effects later on. So they're not even thinking of what that really does affect when they just sign these with a broad brush stroke like this.
That's like horrific. I didn't even know about that. I mean, you being a nurse, you know these kinds of things, but it's just kind of like, I think people don't understand. They think it's just about, gender affirming care is just about and here's the thing, if it was just about transgender people, that would be fine. But also it's going to impact you. I mean, this is the whole thing. A lot of people are kind of like, well, we thought this was just going to impact the people that we didn't like. We didn't we didn't know we were part of that. We didn't know. I mean, and think about it, as far as people who are like perimenopausal or have menopause, a lot of those medical procedures, not medical procedures, but a lot of that research is because of transgender people. I mean, that's helping a lot of people kind of make it through, it's just trying to help a lot of people make it through perimenopause, menopause.
That's a conversation that my doctor and I had, that, we were the new, I'm on progesterone and an estrogen supplement because I'm perimenopausal and I don't like hot flashes. And I also don't like just being irritated at everything in general. And, she went to a conference recently when we were, I just had the progesterone added, and she was telling me about a conference that she went to, and that the new research is showing that this hormone replacement for menopausal women is safe to take for the rest of your life. We have that research because of trans people getting gender affirming care and being on those hormones for long periods of time. Previously, we thought that women would at some point in time have to stop taking hormone replacement in peri and menopause. Now we know, because trans people take these hormones for long periods of time. Now we know that they're safe.
Yeah, this is something that I don't think people really understand or realize. I mean, this is the whole thing. You should care about people anyway, not just because, okay, well, it could impact me. That should not be the reason you care about things, but know that we are literally all connected. We're
Yes.
not all that different. I think that's the kind of like the thing that we should kind of remember, is that we're not all that different. When you harm one group of people, you harm yourself, because we are all part of the same human community. Even though hegemony tries to make us feel like, oh, we're different because we're in a different city, or we're in a different county, or we're from a different country, or we have historical difference, or we are different like genders, or different. We're really not that different. And these rules and regulations, we are oppressing people owing to, you know, these essentially socially constructed identities, like that just are that exist strictly to like exist essentially to oppress you. Um and parts of me kind of wonder, like in regards to gender, like, oh, do we really need to have separate genders? Do we really need that? I mean, okay, yes, I know they exist, but I'm in my own head, I'm like, do they exist to like actually help us, or do they exist to kind of go, you're the lesser gender? I think
Yeah.
about the second sex, like Simone
Yeah.
Beauvoir. My cat's named after her. And I think about the second sex, and I'm like, is this really necessary? I mean, not that I want to. I know this is a deeper conversation. We're talking about feminist urbanism, but it's actually important, because even like being on the street, like think about walking around, being on the street. It's kind of like, oh, you're a bad person. If you're a woman and you're on the street and you're not, in the past, if you're a woman and you were on the street, you were viewed as kind of like, well, if you are a middle class woman of like, of a certain class, you wouldn't have to be on the street. That's something. And even now, think about it. We're in North Jersey. And so there are women that are kind of like in the house in North Jersey, and their husbands work in Manhattan. Manhattan is for people, or for men. That's for men to do
That's for men.
men and manly things. And if you're a true lady, you don't have to go to Manhattan and work a job and be on the disgusting subway. I mean, it's really like this kind of, that was a really a thing in the past, but now, it's almost like I'm kind of afraid it's coming back. I mean, New Jersey, we think we have abortion, like, oh, we have, it's pro-choice and we have a right to get an abortion when we want in New Jersey, but New Jersey is a purple state.
It is a purple state, and there's a lot of places down in South Jersey that it does not feel like New Jersey, like the New Jersey that I know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing. Like, think about abortion clinics. Oh, you could make a zoning law, and you could make it so that people can't access abortions because, oh, well, you can't, this place isn't good enough. It's not good enough. This place is not zoned for health clinics for women. And we need to have a parking requirement. We need to make it harder. I mean, and I think that's something interesting. Like in South Jersey, is it easy to access abortions in South Jersey? Because we have people in New Jersey who would like to make abortion illegal. We are very kind of like complacent. We always think, oh, we're in a safe state. And here's the thing, I always think about California, where I'm from, and they always talk about safe state. When I was in California, um, Pete Wilson was the governor, and essentially what he did was he passed, I think it was the law, I think was Prop 209. And 209 essentially, and I might be wrong. I'm sorry. I have, owing to the internet, I have bad memory. But Prop 209, what they essentially did was make it so that immigrants or people who are undocumented could not access health care, could not get driver's license, and they ended affirmative action.
I
I
remember that. I remember when that went
Oh
through.
yeah. I was like the first class of people. I was one of the first classes that did not have affirmative action. And I remember I was always kind of like annoyed because people were like, "Well, you got affirmative action." And I'm like, "It was over. It was over. By the time I moved, it was over. I never got that. So what are you talking about?" And I think that it's like, we think, oh, California is really liberal and whatever. I mean, they defunded California's schools. It was a mess. I mean, I think about New Jersey and how people complain about New Jersey taxes, but the schools in New Jersey are wonderful. The schools, the parks, and California with Prop 13, they defunded everything, and you know, it was a interesting period. Before you want to say something, I'm just kind of like going like, oh my
Well,
god.
and yeah, and just some of my like Googling, not real research, Googling research,
Mm-hmm.
Union Township in 2023, Union Township, New Jersey, which is part of North Jersey, they banned abortion clinics, tattoo parlors, massage parlors, and animal hospitals.
If you saw my face, my mouth would be open. What?
Yeah, yeah, like so, like that. And it's, I really couldn't find any reason or rationale as to why they were banning these from being within the Union Township city limits. Most of what I found was like, quotes from city council people, well, this is our town and that's why we put these up for a ballot, so. But yeah, so it was a complete ban on abortion clinics, tattoo parlors, massage parlors, and animal hospitals.
I'm just really disturbed. I think the reason why I'm disturbed is because when I first moved to New Jersey and I met these a creative caravan, Amy Tingle. She was so wonderful, and she was an artist, and essentially she was a lesbian, and they ran her out of town because she talked about this ice cream parlor being sexist, and they ran her out of town.
Yeah.
And I think people don't understand how sexist and oppressive the East Coast is, not just New Jersey, but also New York, and how they use uh, zoning and land policy in order to oppress people who are not cisgendered white men.
Yes, and they it's very much, they use a lot of that. Like I've seen it in a lot of smaller towns in New Jersey, where they use a lot of fear tactics, like what can this bring to our town, like always like with a Walmart, like they don't want like the mom and pop businesses to go out. That's a bad example because I don't want the mom and pop businesses to go out of business either, but like they there's always like really big propaganda pushes whenever there's a a a proposal for any kind of these businesses. There's like, and it is a lot of like, I hate to say it, but it's a lot of like the PTA, like NIMBY moms that
Mm-hmm.
organize these pushes of like, oh, we don't want this in our neighborhood, our children, like so on and so forth.
No, I totally understand. I mean, here's the thing. It's like, to me, it's like, as a feminist, I'm always trying to support people, but it's very I meet so many pick me's, as we call it. Pick me's is like essentially like a woman who wants guys to like her. So essentially, she kind of succumbs. She kind of like acquiesces to the patriarchy to order to like gain favor from that person. I know I said that in a really weird way, but but there's kind of like this weird pick me kind of like I care about the children. And it's also, I think that's the thing too. It's like we have to care about safety, and this is scary, and this is whatever. And and this puritanical kind of weird Christian type thing, like, oh, we can't have abortions, we can't walk around outside, the train is unsafe, it's unsafe for me to leave the house, it's unsafe for strangers to be here. I'm afraid. We're all afraid. Our kids.
There's a girl on TikTok actually that does a series about this pervasive belief that a lot of like suburban, especially white women have. For listeners, I myself am white. That white women have that of they're going to be abducted or their children are being targeted for trafficking and things like that. Like there's this really perverse feeling, like women make TikToks about it all the time. This man looked at my baby in a Walmart and I think he's going to traffic us. Like it's
well, I mean,
big fear that has really no basis.
That's the thing. How often does that happen? It's so bizarre, and it's so. And I think is I don't want to like mock people, because what if it really is something that's but it's not. It's like the data shows that's not happening.
Yes,
there is no mass kidnapping. There's nobody trying to take your kids. There's nobody trying to like do things to you. And this is, and also too, this fear, this fear, and it's kind of like, oh, if you put this out there, it's like, well, we warned you that people weren't safe, and then you went out there and you got pregnant. You deserve what you get. I mean, it almost turns anything that happens to women into like this, like, well, you deserved it because we told you it was not safe.
We told you it wasn't safe, and you did it anyway.
You did it anyway. I mean, this is. And I think this is like something that's really, it is, and I think about even like people protesting outside of abortion clinics. This is, if you're in a place that is very kind of like, we're a suburb, even if it's not a suburb, because where we live in North Jersey, they call themselves a suburb, but the difference between suburb and urban is, urban means Black people live there, and suburb means it's more white people there. It's not based in geographic, the technical geographic term. So it's you're sitting there and you're in this weird, situation where it's kind of like, well, if you had just acted right, this wouldn't have happened to you, and this is harmful to young women.
And to put that responsibility on young women, like this is your fault, when we don't have the proper sex health education for young boys and young girls, when we don't, allow them, when we don't allow open and honest conversations with children about sexuality, avoiding getting pregnant and things like that, like you can't blame young people for mistakes when we're not giving them the tools and the information to avoid those mistakes. And the tools are, and the information is not just, don't go outside wearing a short skirt.
No, and I think that thing is really bizarre. I mean, one kind of like, one of the things I kind of want to leave people with something interesting is that I remember when I was in school, in some ways, it seemed like it was easier to get an abortion than it was to get birth control.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, I mean, condoms, yes, but like for women to get stuff, it seemed in some ways it was easier to get an abortion and to get access to birth control, which is like kind of wild in a way.
Yeah, well, and there's always been like a perverse, like, well, you don't want to go on that, do you? Like that'll mess you up, that'll make you crazy, you'll get fat, like there's always been an undercurrent of, you don't want to go on the pill. like, and it's coming back much more powerfully in the last couple of years.
That is true. I mean, because it's kind of like, okay, well, they're like, well, you could get condoms, but a lot of guys don't want to use condoms, and because we don't have this conversation about sex, it's in this we're in this weird situation where we act like somebody who's like 16 and having sex, they have they can say like, hey, you got to use a condom, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. But we can't have that conversation because we're acting like people who are 16 don't have sex, which, just so you know, 16-year-olds have sex.
No.
I know I had sex when I was 16. I want to be like clear, so I won't be like, oh yeah, well I don't know. There were people who had sex when they're 16. I know I was having sex when I was 16 years old, and it was just very, yes. But my boyfriend at the time had used condoms, but I was very much, my mom was very like, hey, let's talk about sex and all this stuff, and so I was very much like, you gotta use a condom, blah blah blah. But there are a lot of people whose parents are not like that. But the thing is, this is that if we had healthcare that was accessible on every corner and we had public transit, we could have these conversations. But now, in suburbia, it's like, think about it. Think about you're in Montclair and people, and Montclair is kind of a Tony neighborhood in North New Jersey. And think about if you're 16 or 17 and you need to get an abortion and you are in Montclair and essentially someone's protesting that, how you gonna go and just like, discreetly get an abortion
Yeah.
your neighbor is protesting. I mean, and you can't, and the bus service isn't plentiful. I mean, it's just about privacy. It's just about access. And even in regards to just, women in general, just getting normal service. I mean, I heard that, I'm not going to even talk about this. We're going to talk about senior women later on because I think there's a really interesting topic because my mother-in-law, oh, I shouldn't even say this, but she had an interesting situation. And it's regards to something that can happen to you as a woman when you get older. And I was just like, and it also has to do with United Healthcare.
Oh boy.
I was like, what? I was like, they were okay. My mother-in-law had a woman's problem, and essentially United Healthcare, because she was like 86, they were waiting for her to die
I
before they covered.
I make a sound of gasping. I'm a nurse. I shouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised.
yeah, yeah. But here's the thing: she's super healthy. So she lived, but they finally were like, "Oh, I guess you're going to be alive," and they gave her the surgery. But I mean, she had to wait 2 years. She
Oh
felt
my
like her
god.
uterus was going to fall out of her body.
Oh my god.
And she was so, oh my God, my mother-in-law is so sweet. She was so positive about it. She was like, well, oh, wow, it's uncomfortable. But she was not even like a jerk about it. She was really sweet about it. But I was like, when she told me the story, I was like, this is horrific. And then here's the thing. Think about if she, she essentially, my mother-in-law has a car, has a husband that's still alive, has a good pension. But imagine if you were her and you didn't have a good pension. Think about if you had a minimum wage job and you were living in an apartment and you couldn't, think about what you would have to go through in order to like access that service. So it's not even just about it's not even about transportation, is not just about abortion services, but it's also about, not just about young women. It's also about senior women and things that happen to them in regards to their, reproduction and how bad transportation and expensive housing can make people suffer, can actually kill them. If she hadn't had this really good pension because her husband worked for the University of Wisconsin, if she hadn't had that good pension, I feel like she would be dead.
And you're probably right. There's if I put two and two together, I think I know what issue you're talking about, and that's a common issue with old elderly women.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that common, but it can be a common thing. And yeah, the healthcare will wait until you absolutely need surgery. Because that exists in nursing homes, where it's just like, oh, okay, that's a thing, and we're just gonna push that back up and finish what we're doing. But even in regards to to men's healthcare, a similar issue that men have a lot that seems not too bad at first, but when it becomes an emergency, it's a deadly emergency, is hernias. Older men get hernias very, very frequently. And like I said, it's not that big of a deal, but when it does become a big deal, you're going to go septic and die very quickly. And that's an access thing as well.
Wow. I actually had a friend that they got sepsis, and I'm wondering if that's something to do with it. He well, now because there's not that many younger plumbers, I had a plumber friend who was 90 years old, was totally healthy, died of sepsis. And I always wondered what the hell happened.
Yeah.
But that's good to know. That's good to know. So we gotta wrap this up because it's an interesting conversation. But here's the thing: we don't really think about urbanism in terms of like healthcare or like abortion or whatever. And this is all connected. This is all connected. Being able to access healthcare, being able to get on public transit, being able to or transportation, being able to have a housing next to providers. It's all very, very important.
I
And
had one more little point that I wanted to bring up also, because I'm sure some listeners are going to go, well, what about telehealth and what about medication abortion? Which is, yes, it's great that we have telehealth. It's great that you can get mifepristone in the mail, but 2 to 3% of women who have a medication abortion need a further DNC procedure after the medication abortion. So, and that is a small percentage, but that's still a worthwhile percentage to think of if you don't have access to get to an abortion clinic, or you don't have access to get to some other kind of health clinic that might help you.
I didn't even know that. I mean, I think that's the thing so important. It's just like, we don't really, because we don't know these things. So this is so important, and this is an important issue with urbanism, with feminism, with healthcare, and just with access. And it's something that we took for granted, but like literally, we have 50 years of abortion access, and now it's been stripped away. And so now people can decide if you can or cannot have, men, people who don't have children, who can't have children, can decide if when and if you can decide when you have children. And this is, you know the way our geography is set up. It's, space is power, and how your space is set up can really determine how much power you have, how much access you have, how much control someone can have over you. And it's not some minor thing. It's not like, oh, it's random. We didn't know. They know what they're doing. And
They absolutely know what they're doing.
yeah, yeah, I think it's really important to understand that if you are in suburbia and you think, oh, I'm a privileged woman in suburbia and I have, in a way you're not privileged. You think you're privileged because it's kind of like we use that term privilege. But if you can't get an abortion, if you can't escape your marriage because your husband is like essentially abusing you by essentially saying, I'm not going to give you any money after you've like had children and haven't worked for 10 years, and he's like trapped you in your house, you think you have freedom. You really don't have freedom. um and or if you're like the urban is, the geographic, the zoning, all this stuff, it can decide if you have choices or if you don't have choices. And I don't think people really realize how important zoning, land policy, and just the hegemony of space is for women, and how much it determines who you are, what you can do, what power you have, what access you have. These are all things really, we don't think about it in that way.
Yeah, and feminism and urban feminism affects men as well, because less healthcare centers for women means less healthcare centers for men, and many men get treated for STIs and other issues at all of these healthcare centers. So it's directly affecting everybody.
Exactly. It's not, yeah, exactly. And I think it's like something we don't even think about. And that's why I say, like, even, we think about, like, okay, well, I'm being altruistic by caring about transgender people or ethnic minorities. But no, no. If you're not part of that, it's still helping you. It's
It's
not
still
just like,
helping
oh,
you.
yeah, yeah. It's not like it's not just about them. It's also about you. And I think that's something that people should realize and really embrace.
We are all intertwined. The only people who are not intertwined with us are the top 1%.
Exactly,
They're the
exactly.
people that do not need to live in this reality with us. But all of us are existing in the same reality together.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing I think we have to remember. We can't let them like separate us. We gotta have solidarity because really we are living in the same space. We're living in
Yes.
the same space. We have to share all of these, there's this tool, and actually there is abundance in the collective.
Yes,
So
there
the
is.
bigger we can make our collective, the more power we have, the more abundance that we have, the more stuff that we have. I wish I could say more sophisticated words, but as you know, Kimberly, I've been drinking. As usual. Anyway, okay. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you for listening to Auto Asphyxiation. This is Lark, and
Kimberly.
yes, and we will see you next week.